All right, everybody. I'll open the Budget Committee. My name's Councillor Greg Sayers. I'm chairing today, supported by my Deputy Councillor Henderson. Just in terms of the, before I go through the kind of absences, etc., I might get the others online first, so I will do that. Those who are absent, David Typry, Chair of the Independent Maori Statutory Board, but I understand Glenn Wilcox might be attending in his. Oh, well done. Right on time there, Glenn. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Lateness will be Councillor Foley. She's just on some council business, but will join us as soon as she can. We've got early departure registered by our Filipina, who's going off on some important business with one of the ministers in his ward. So if I could just perhaps move those apologies. Could I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, there are some requests for electronic attendance, which we just need to approve as a committee. That's from, thank you. That's from Councillor Darby and Councillor Hills and Tony Kake, and Glenn's here, so that's okay. Councillor Newman and also Councillor Andy Baker. Are there any others? That's all. So could I just perhaps, Angela, move that, seconded by Josephine. Councillor Bartley, thank you very much. All those in favour, say aye. Carried. So we'll get those links out to them immediately. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest on any of the topics we might be covering today? There aren't any. There are no petitions registered to be presented today. Did have one request for public input. That was from the Onehunga bid, but it was more appropriate that they actually spoke to us tomorrow, the governing body, because it was more around policy rather than actually within the mandate of this committee. So we'll be hearing from them tomorrow. No local board input, no extraordinary business. So just before I go to the first item, item 7, I'd just like to reflect for Aucklanders that this budget committee and its annual budget that we're committing to now is part of an ongoing process from when we did a 10-year budget just last year. And in line with the feedback that we got from Aucklanders at that time, the Mayor's been quite diligent, and so we as a committee, to keep in line with what Aucklanders wanted to deliver over those 10 years by this annual budget. One of the key things was keeping the rate increases to what was communicated to Aucklanders in that 10-year budget process, which we've been able to do, and hopefully we'll ratify that today. Also, just for Aucklanders' knowledge, the annual planning processes for Auckland Council is quite different from those from other councils, where other councillors will meet and the Mayor will chair a budget sitting budget collectively. In Auckland, the structure and the legislation is a little bit different. There's actually a mayoral proposal gets put forward. So the Mayor and the Mayor's office prepare the annual budgets as a proposal that then comes in front of the councillors to debate and modify, that then goes out for public consultation, which has done, and then it comes back through the processes of local board input and further debate and final resolution, which will occur today on this particular budget. So that's just a little bit of background of how it works. I think this year we had one of the largest ever numbers of public submissions back to us, which was very encouraging. It means that Aucklanders are engaged. So just as an outline for you of what we're covering today, first of all, the first item we'll be going through is around the process in a bit more detail and what we have been doing and achieved to date. Well, then the next item is about the local board feedback. The next item will be kind of the substantial item about the annual plan itself and the annual budget. We'll then make decisions about other rates and fee matters. We'll get a summary of the workshops and there's no extraordinary business. At the end of that process, councillors, we will be breaking into confidential because there's one more item we need to discuss today so it can be ratified by the governing body, and that's the Q Theatre. So we'll just have a discussion about their funding and confidential. So just so you've got an idea of how the day will play out. And I think it's probably appropriate, because it is the mayoral proposal, that I'd like to, I'll get the mayor to speak to the annual plan. I don't know if you want to do that now, Your Worship, or perhaps wait for the actual item itself. Wait for the item. Very good. Okay. So that brings us to item number 7. I'll just ask the officers to come forward. Michael Burns, Hannah Woon, thank you. Just the purpose of this item is to recap the annual plan process, provide an overview of the decisions required at this meeting, and set out the next steps to finalise and adopt the Auckland Council's annual plan for 2025-26. So I think probably, obviously we've got our papers in progress, but if you'd like to just speak to the item, then we can ask you some questions if we need clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Tēnā koutou katoa. My report provides procedural context for the decisions required to finalize the annual plan for 2025-2026. Most importantly, today's decision will enable staff to prepare the final documents for adoption by end of June. These decisions follow an extensive consultation process with communities across Auckland. During consultation, we received approximately 13,000 submissions and have heard from 222 organizations and 22 Māori entities. Following the conclusion of the consultation, we have worked to provide you with advice to support your decisions today, covering the various topics consulted on. Most of these are summarized in today's agenda as an attachment to the mayor proposal. I would like to note that on 13th of May, the Audit and Risk Committee met and received a report on the controls and risk management of this process as it relates to final decision. The committee resolved to note that these processes remain ongoing and have been working effectively to date. The committee also resolved to advise the governing body that an appropriate approach is being taken to manage the key financial risk associated with the annual plan 2025-2026. The decisions made today will enable staff to proceed with drafting the final annual plan documents, which will be brought to you for formal adoption on 26th of June. These will enable you to set rates for the next financial year. Finally, a sincere thank you to you, our governors, for your ongoing input and engagement, which have been instrumental to reaching this stage. That's all from me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you for that, Hannah. It's pleasing to hear that feedback too about kind of the oversight of how the committee's been running, and thank you for your words of acknowledgement to us, but equally, back to the staff that have been involved right through this whole process, including democracy services and local boards as well. All those staff that have supported this process, very important. So I'll open up for any questions. We have the or perhaps I'll ask if somebody would like to move the recommendation there, which is a noting of it. Yeah, thank you. That's the Deputy Mayor Simpson, who would like to second it, and the Mayor will second it. All right. Do we have any questions for the officers? I don't think there are. I think it's fairly straightforward, but yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. So I'll just put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against? Okay, carried on the voices. Item 8, local board feedback and advocacy. Okay, so the purpose of this item is to provide an overview of local board feedback and the advocacy of the proposed annual plan. The officers are here, Renee and Phoebe, thank you very much. We'd like to speak briefly to the report, and there's no presentation. Okay, thank you.
Kia ora koutou. As part of Auckland Council's shared governance model, local boards have a legislated role to input on regional plans. Local boards considered consultation on their feedback. Local boards considered their consultation feedback and gave input and advice at business meetings between late April and early May. And also they shared their views at the governing body workshop, the budget committee workshop a few weeks ago. This report summarises input and advocacy from the local boards and focuses on the common themes. The complete set of local board resolutions relating to the annual plan are provided as an attachment. Key themes rising from the local boards were broad support for the overall plan and the proposed bed night levy, strong focus on fairer funding. Boards are asking for more financial transparency and inflation adjusted funding to maintain service levels, and highlighted cost pressures for future years 26-27. The adopted advocacy initiatives and other requests raised by multiple local boards generally focused on improved transport options, environmental sustainability, investment in sports and recreation facilities, and compliance and enforcement. Happy to take any questions.
Very good, thank you. Short and sweet. Are there any questions on this item? Anyone online? If you have got a question online, please just indicate in the chat. The motion's been moved by the Deputy Mayor, thank you. Seconded by the Mayor, very good, thank you. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Those against, nay. Carried.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, item 9, this is the substantial item. Again, the purpose is to set out the Mayor's recommendations for the annual plan 2025-26 for considerations and decisions by the Budget Committee, which will be recommended to the governing body following this meeting. So we are having the governing body today after this meeting for the ratification process. We've got Jazz here as an officer that we can direct questions to, and I would like to just point out and make councillors aware that in the recommendations that you had in your papers, there is an additional one at the end now, and after E there's an F. I don't know if we can scroll up to that. I'll just read it to you, making sure you're comfortable. This I wanted to add this in as the chair of the committee because of the advocacy that we got from the local boards. We've got a lot of advocacy around how we're going to fund, events. We've got a lot of advocacy around the Fix It Fund, the Fix and Finish Fund, and we also got a lot of advocacy around compliance. So I had the opportunity to discuss this with the Chief Executive yesterday, and we've come up with this recommendation just to make sure that their concerns are considered by us, and it reads as follows. Request that the Chief Executive report back on options for increasing compliance activity by the use of warranted community volunteers and or appropriate businesses, including what bylaws can be included within that scope. So that's just looking at other ways that we might be able to, what bylaws might be able to be given more compliance attention and by trained personnel rather than our officers running out to very remote locations. So on that, I think I'll hand over to you, Your Worship.
Yeah, thanks for that. This report sets out the key recommendations this committee will make to the governing body directly following this meeting. I'll speak to my mayoral proposal after the questions and debate, but briefly, it sets out an approach for 25-26 that is in line with year 2 of the LTP. The LTP was like a contract with Aucklanders and of no intention of deviating from this. It also includes a short-term approach to the funding of major events and destination marketing, taking into account feedback from Aucklanders in the tourism and accommodation sectors. This proposal is a pragmatic and sensible approach to a budget that will be inherited by a new term of elected members. I've asked Jazz, my Chief of Staff, to sit up at the table there to respond to any deep questions that you might have, along with other council staff, our present and online. But Chair, so it's over to you for questions.
Well, I might just see if you'd like to move the recommendations, Your Worship. Would you like to move the recommendations? Yes.
I'll move this, please.
And Deputy Mayor, it's probably appropriate that you second that, so we'll do that. And we'll open up for questions. Way you go, Ken. Councillor Turner.
To you, Mr. Chair, that last F that you've put in there, warranted community volunteers, are we going to delegate by some sort of legislative authority to these people to do a compliancing job for us?
I think the idea is to see what options there are there. So we don't know any of the detail yet, Ken, but the idea is to try and a lot of the feedback from the local boards was particularly remote ones. The compliance officers may be located a long way away from an incident. I don't know, it might be freedom camping or something like that, right? So by the time they respond, it's too late. So is there opportunity for people to be trained, to be appropriately equipped to go out and inspect that in advance, put some eyes on it to clarify back to the compliance team that somebody should be coming, or you know, are they able to deal with it themselves and approach those people? I don't know. So it's just looking at what options would be safe and appropriate, if any.
Mr. Chair, I sympathise with the pragmatic approach, but I'm in lots of situations where I'm trying to help ratepayers sort their way through minutiae of problems that are coming out of the lower levels of the organisation, which is partly misunderstanding by our own staff and circumstances which are overly complicated. And I often see that as being because, these are quite complex things that we're trying to monitor and manage. And the people involved in the initial approach aren't maybe up to speed. So I am a little bit concerned about this. I'll think about it. Thanks.
Yeah, that's right. It's just, might be worth having a look at the options. That's all, Ken. Yeah. Next question, Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm really keen on filling the gap for major events. So I've got two questions around that. One question around that, one on something else. So probably to you, Your Worship, can you confirm that we will definitely fill the gap in major events funding by a combination of the city centre targeted rates reserves, further voluntary contributions from the industry, and Tātaki Unlimited Auckland reserves, along with a contribution of 500k from your own mayoral office budget?
Well, yes, we will, one way or another.
That's good, thank you. And then my second question, it is sort of still on the line, but it's what is the benefit of funding the gap this way instead of maybe, and I'm not saying this is what I want to do, but what is the benefit of funding the gap this way instead of, for example, a rates rise?
Okay, well, these different funding sources which we've worked to get together are not a long-term fix, which will allow us to continue to keep the pressure on the government to consider a sustainable solution that Aucklanders have shown that they would support, such as the visitor bed night levy, like in all other cities around the world. If we just fill the gap with rates, first, that is an additional imposition on ratepayers, and secondly, the government will just turn around and say, see, you can afford it. Rates also avoids those who get the most benefit from our advocacy for major events, either customers who go to major events, having to pay a contribution. 60% of Aucklanders told us that they want an alternative long-term solution, and we want to keep the pressure on that is the right long-term solution. 2.5% agreed by the accommodation industry is what they charge you for using PayWave, but it gives us the money. So we're covering it this year, but the pressure will stay on in the future for the government to wake up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. And in raising this question, I want to acknowledge the work that has gone into preparing a comprehensive budget. The difficulty that I have, and I want to pose a question to Jazz, if I may, is around the Fix and Finish Fund. I understand probably more than anybody else sitting around this table, I understand the purpose of this. And I would normally wish to see a contestable process, but there is some very real discontent amongst those in legacy Auckland City. And to that end, I want to raise with you the question around the concerns that I'm hearing. Some have expressed living in Roskilde after the Easter floods, which in many ways were more profound than those of the anniversary week, that they have felt completely abandoned by Auckland City or Auckland Council. They have felt completely neglected. There have been meetings, and I know that the CEO is looking to try and encourage the storm recovery group to meet again to give some depth of consideration for this abandoned community in their mind. But it would have been an ability had the Fix and Finish Fund allowed for some small funds from that legacy Auckland City area to have assisted in this particular situation. And I want to know why no consideration would be given to that, because I think it's, as the person who voted to keep the shares which enabled the largesse that we now have in terms of the Auckland Future Fund, I feel quite aggrieved about this. And yet I want to be supportive of the budget. I want to commend those who have tried to bring things together. But this has left a really bad taste in my mouth.
Mr. Chair, I might attempt to answer that initially, and then perhaps the Chief Executive might assist. So the intention of the Fix and Finish Fund was in order that some of the money that may be gained from selling the airport shares early and investing it with the Future Fund prior to the year that it was going to kick in, which is this financial year, the second year of the long-term plan, was to look to benefit those local board projects that may have required some additional funding. So this is at that point in time, in order to get them either fixed or finished. And so that was the original purpose, and I believe governing body did give effect to that when they passed that resolution. On the second part of that, in terms of the resilience and or recovery aspects of the residents of Puketa Papa, you know, I did have this conversation with you yesterday. There has been $1 billion project related to Category 3 buyouts that has been well publicised, communicated and consulted with the public. There are a number of stormwater projects, etc., which are of a regional scale. And so I would consider those more regional activities. But if there was a formed local board project in that area that needed to be fixed or finished, I'd imagine they could put that forward as part of a contestable process. But to me, those resilience and recovery projects are more better considered regionally. But I may pass that to the Chief Executive.
I do think it's important that if there's something specific that makes sense in terms of size to address through the Fix and Finish Fund, that process allows for that to at least be considered. The scale of, I think as Jazz is implying, the scale of cost in terms of addressing the underlying flood risk in areas will vastly outstrip what's available in the Fix and Finish Fund. And then there's a more general question, as we have discussed, and that I'm keen for councillors to discuss in due course, around areas that we have residual flood risk in that haven't been addressed because of the scope and the limited nature, extensive as it is, the limited nature of the 2023 policy and funding around buyouts. I mean, we know that there are properties that have been that we're now aware of that weren't affected to the same extent in 2023 and are therefore outside of scope. So that's the problem currently in this area, and it will be a problem in other areas in the city in due course, at least for a period of time until we can catch up with some of the infrastructure solutions.
So when we took the vote back, which was largely around the contestable fund, it was prior to the rain, it was prior to the floods. Circumstances have changed, and yet we don't seem to have the ability. I'm not asking that these funds be applied to the scale of the work that needs to be undertaken, but in some small way that would provide some minor mitigations for a community that have been greatly displaced by this event. I also feel the need on behalf of the Albert Eden Local Board to say they are feeling, given the legacy Auckland contribution to this, they are feeling that they have been overlooked. And I need to put that on the record today, but my heart is really in the advocacy that I'm trying to bring to you, that an amount, no matter how small, might have been a perception that council was interested in Puketapapa, which currently the perception is that council is not.
I hear what you're saying there, but if you recall with the 2023 flood, the initial move to put a lot of money in came from the government actually, and we matched it. And we went through a lot of points saying that this should not be seen as the ratepayer becoming everybody's last insurer. We knew full well that there would be other areas which Howard, for instance, surprisingly survived the 2023 one, but it's even more prone to long-term damage. And so, and we knew at the time that people would try to see that as an indication that we will carry on and save everybody in the future. But we had a great deal of pointing out that this was a one-off, voluntary. It got a bit less bloody voluntary, and I wasn't happy about the sudden growth in numbers from our people. We didn't handle it well. And so we're concerned. I'll get on you with what you're saying. It's a contestable fund. There may be things that these people can put in for that fix and finish. But we are not the last insurer for everybody. And I think in some ways, I think the government opened the door itself. They're the ones who started this. Perhaps they should go to the government and say, well, you're going to put up some money first of all. But I bet you find that they won't want to do that either. And so sometimes you just have to say enough is enough. And I felt there's an absolute guarantee that in the next few years, Sharon Stewart will be back pointing out all the places around Howick which are going to flood, will have flooded. And what are we going to do about it? Well, the thing is that we're not the last insurer.
Your Worship, my intention is not, and I share your view, that we cannot be the last insurer. It was simply around a small packet of measures that could have helped individual households where there might even be costs of consenting to do some work that will help mitigate. It was simply a small gesture. And I feel that this is really mean-spirited. And as such, I feel very disappointed over this particular aspect of the budget.
Can I commit Councillor Fletcher to doing some more work with you on what the organisation can do through business as usual measures as well to ensure that people don't feel neglected? There are things happening. It's not a case that there's nothing, but I'm really happy to explore what other practical things we can do using resources available to the organisation already.
I'm very grateful for that genuine offer from you as CEO. And this, when giving it consideration, I know that this is work that might be required elsewhere around the region. It's just there, but for the grace of God. Right at the moment, it's Roskill, but it will be, or maybe Faux, but it will be elsewhere. And we need to have a comprehensive response. I am not suggesting for a minute that we pick up this as the last stop in terms of insurance, but nor can we absolutely ignore the plight of people who are under immense pressure and pain.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to also, I'm happy if you want to reserve your right to speak in the comments as well, because I'll let that go through as a question.
I don't need to speak. I think I've made my point, but I would like, when it comes to the Fix and Finish Fund, for my vote to be recorded against the proposal, but the support for the overall budget, because I appreciate the work that has been undertaken.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Also, I've taken on your feedback, Councillor Turner, and also Councillor Hills online, and there's been a slight modification to that F that's been agreed to by the mover and the seconder, just to make it more investigative. Okay. Councillor Ferry, thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. I too have been contacted about the Fix and Finish Fund and had some questions around, can you just confirm for me, please, this might be a Jazz question, the timeframe. So the floods happened in January 2023, and when did we vote on the Fix and Finish Fund?
I believe that was about the end of May, early June 2023.
Right, so after the first round of floods, we voted on the concept of it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And with the Fix and Finish Fund, obviously we have an issue here where it's going to be contestable. Is it possible that local boards could put forward projects of the kind that Councillor Fletcher's outlining to this fund?
Yes, of course. I didn't have the opportunity to say that if it's a local board project, they can put that forward.
Thank you. And in particular, I was interested in, I know from my time on the Puketapa local board that there's a number of projects that have been sitting in the Biodiversity Offset Bank waiting for developers to pick them up that provided some stormwater mitigation. And is that the kind of project that could be looked at? Ones that are already in that Biodiversity Offset Bank? I'm thinking in particular there's one in Keith Hay Park.
Look, yes, I'm not particularly familiar with that project, but if it is something that can be delivered, and I think the Mayor had outlined this in his proposal with the private sector or other community providers in a joined up way, then yes, of course, that would be eligible.
Thank you. And then what support will be given to local boards to assist them with putting their bids in for the contestable fund? I think that's going to be quite a key question. I think particularly in regard to issues around equitable distribution. So it's the support they get to put in their bids, but then also how it's going to be weighted to ensure some equity in the distribution. Those two things are together.
So through the chair, the CFO and I have discussed that they'll have a team set up that will look at how to support local boards in putting forward their bids, in particular how to comply with the criteria and also how to shape that up. And I think the community team will also be helping in that regard.
Thanks. Sorry, just pointing at you, it's just a little bit hard to hear, Jazz. You're sort of tapering off towards the end. It's okay, I could hear you, but it's just other people might have found that difficult.
I apologise. I'm sure the Mayor will tell me off about that as well. And sorry, I did mean to say that the decisions were made in 2024, should I say, June 2024.
Okay, thank you. So final question then. There's not a lot of time for local boards, but for like if we pass this today and then our next round of voting, which will be on the, basically who wins the contestable bids for the fund, is the 29th of July. Is there any wiggle room in those dates if local boards are finding it difficult to pull their cases together? Particularly, I'm thinking of where they might work across local board areas. It might be relatively easy for them to pick something off the shelf that applied just to their local board area, but if they're going to cooperate with other local boards, perhaps on a package, would there be some wiggle room about potentially pushing that back a little bit, if necessary?
I would have to come back to you on that, Councillor, because we've chosen that date due to the governing body meeting being scheduled, and I think post that date we start getting into pre-election period, etc. So there will be a taper off in terms of
Right.
meetings and availability of elected members, etc. So that was why the date was chosen, but you know, we'd have to consider what the concerns might be and what help we can give local boards in putting those bids together.
Okay, so if there's going to need to be a change to that timeline, that probably needs to be identified sooner rather than later.
Correct.
Yeah, so is that conversation happening with the governance team, what used to be called local board services? Are they ready to go?
Yes, they are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for those answers. Just to assist those with questions, the speaking order is Councillor Piner, Councillor Stewart, Councillor Williamson, Councillor Hills, followed by Councillor Turner, followed by Councillor Leone, followed by Councillor Henderson at the moment. Al.
Morena he mana, morena chair, morena koutou, tēnā koe te rangatira Glenn, ngā mihi ki a koe, and morena chairs. My question is firstly on the fix and finish fund. With the criteria that was in the mayoral proposal and also subsequent budget documents, could we find ourselves with a situation that maybe 3 or 4 local boards may have a project that may total $20 million, and it could come from one of the, or 4 from the legacy Auckland City Council areas, or even Manukau City Council areas? Could we find ourselves in a situation like that?
Well, through the chair, yes, we could. I mean, being a contestable process, it might be oversubscribed, and we would, you know, staff advice to you as elected members would be, you know, assess those projects against the criteria, what local boards' budgets are available to meet shortfall, or what other funding options they may have. So the Fix and Finish Fund was not intended to be the sole source of funding for projects. It was designed to be a top-up.
So what discussions are you having when the applications are received with the local boards that we could possibly have a situation where Auckland City Council, the legacy community boards, would end up taking the majority of the 20 million? What discussions will you be having with Manukau City Council legacy community boards? I mean, look, I from my perspective, that's unfair. If we're looking at the 20 million to legacy councils, what discussions will take place if we find that when all the applications go in, there is a situation that may end up doing it? Because I know of projects that are totaling 10 million already. I know of projects that 2.5 million. I know projects that are, you know, so Jazz, how do we manage that process, please?
It's a very good question, Councillor. So, look, I can't predict the future in terms of what will be coming up, but I know that the staff will be, one, assisting the local boards in terms of packaging up those projects and their requests for funding. And like any budget or other process where there are competing priorities, they'll be assessed and ranked in terms of prioritisation, and that will be a decision for you as governing body to make. So all of those will be presented to you from the discussions I've had with staff. None of them will be left off the table. They'll all be assessed against the criteria and presented to you for your decision making and prioritisation.
So just another one, here, Mana Chair, and it's to the CEO. What will you be doing to at least manage that process if we have that situation? Because I'm assuming that it's your staff who will be getting it's your staff who will be getting those applications from the respective local boards in the 2 previous TLAs. So what will you be doing to at least manage that process?
Well, we'll be supporting the process with advice, analysis of the projects, of the bids, and in that advice, we'll take account of a whole range of things. Obviously, the traditional cost benefit view of any particular project, but I think to the point you were making earlier, we will make it clear where the, what the history is, in term, that sits behind the fix and finish fund, and how different communities are benefited or not in the allocation of the money. So
Yeah, sorry, Phil, I
all
couldn't
we
hear
can do is make
the,
it very transparent.
the mayor was saying something, I couldn't hear you. What was that?
I'm saying in the advice and analysis we give you, we will cover off a range of things, cost benefit of projects, but also how the benefits fall across the communities that historically were airport shareholding areas, and that who's benefited and not in terms of the projects.
Okay, Chair, I've got two more, and I don't want to go left and right like I'm playing a game of tennis, but Jazz, can you do me a favour? Can you send me the criteria that is from the mayoral proposal and also staff advice about how those bids will be considered, please? I actually tried in the last 15 minutes to find them in the documents, but if you could just send those criteria so I can deal with the two local boards that I represent.
No problem.
Okay, and last question is, can you go back to F, please? And the question is to the CEO. Phil, around the volunteer, when I see the words volunteering or volunteers there, I look at free. It's not going to cost. Is the work that you're doing with F, and I now see which could include, would that include any payments for the volunteers, or are we saying with this F that they will not be paid, they're volunteers? That's the question, please.
Look, I think it's important. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. I'm not even remotely thinking that this is not about shifting the burden of responsibility for compliance matters strongly away from the professional area of the organisation. There are elements of it that absolutely need to be done by paid staff in a professional capacity. When I was talking to the chair about this, I made that view known in relation to, for example, dogs. However, around the edges, there might well be an opportunity for community volunteers in a parks context outside of the city centre, etc., where this might have merit. And all we're doing is committing to having a look at it and bringing some advice back to you, probably to Councillor Bartley's committee in the first instance, and then back to the wider group.
Yeah, so just supplementary. Look, for me, is that's part of the work that you will be doing as per F that we see around whether the volunteers, wherever they fit in, would payment be part of the consideration or work moving forward? That's all I'm asking. I mean, I got my own views around what it is and what it means. And one of them is that it looks as if we don't have enough staff to do them. But I know that's not the case because you've just explained that. But will that work include payment for those volunteers?
Yes, it certainly can. I'm happy to do that, and there'll be other questions about uniforms and expenses and what have you if we were to go down that path. So yes.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair.
Further questions? Thank you, Phil. Councillor Stewart.
Oh, thank you. I just wondered, just a question, why are we still consenting new builds in known floodplains? Because to me, that's future liability, and we seem to be still doing that. I just wonder, why are we?
That's a very good question, Councillor Stewart. I'm not sure I can answer that, but perhaps I'll throw to Phil.
Look, I'm happy to take it. it's a very valid question. It's obviously it's the reason why the natural hazards aspect of the plan change is being looked at to strengthen council's ability to preclude development in certain areas, or to put some requirements on those developments that mitigates against the flood risk. In the meantime, to some degree, our hands are tied, but I take the general point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, well, that's good. Thanks. Phil, I want to just pick up on that because I think that's an unsatisfactory answer. If any organisation was aware of a ethical or a moral or a fiscal or a health and safety hazard that existed, it would not be a defence in court to say, well, we're going to get onto it sometime. We're going to fix it at some point. I've raised this with you. You told me we're going to get a paper back about what our options might be and so on, and still nothing. Now, I suggest to you that no organisation can be aware of the financial hazard we are creating for this council by allowing bills to occur in known floodplains that will almost guaranteed be back with a claim and a huge amount of money as a fiscal. And we are not just saying stop right now and we will go and evaluate what our options are and come back. Any company that said, yeah, we know that our staff are exposed to some really serious health and safety, we'll have a look at it one time, sometime, maybe have a look at whether we do something about it. You'd be done. You'd be done like a dinner. And we are now, there are buildings in our ward that are a disgrace to have been allowed to build. They're building under what the water line is, even when it just rains normally. And if it gets a flood like we've had for some other parts of Auckland, like West Auckland and others have had, these would be flooded to up to the downpipes, the drain pipes. And so you've got to say, you can't just keep saying,
Chair.
let this go.
Point of order,
And I want to know-
1.7.2, which I can raise a point of order. I know we're in questions, we're not into a debate. I'm hoping that you will rule that we will stick with
I asked it as a
questions
question.
now. It is a point of order. There's no interruptions while I'm explaining the point of order. And then I would hope that anybody who has any whakaaro, any feedback, that they will give it then. So that's my point of order, Chair. It is questions and not a debate based on a response that the CEO gave to Councillor Stewart. Kia ora.
Thank you, and I take that point of order on, and I think he's probably on track there. So if we can just frame.
Well, I raised it as a question, Mr. Chairman. I raised it. What are we going to do about this?
Then, okay,
We can't just let it drift.
let's get an answer.
The
Look,
liability.
Megan's popped up to the front to address the question. Can I just, and not to be argumentative, but it is wrong to characterise this as nothing happening in the meantime. There is a lot happening in the meantime. There are buildings being knocked back all the time, or requirements being put on them. But I do take the point. It's a very real issue. Megan?
Kia ora, thank you through the chair. We are legally unable under the RMA to make any changes since 2023 or since the enactment of the intensification plan change requirements. That's for us called Plan Change 78. We've been working for 2 years with the previous government and this government to enable us to do exactly what you're talking about, Councillor Williamson. So that is the work that we've been doing with you over the last 9 months at least, through workshops to talk through where are these thresholds going to be, where are there going to be areas where they'll be no longer able to build, or where we'll put new additional standards or greater standards required before building is accepted. So I share your frustration. We've had it for 2 years. We are physically unable to get that done until the government helps us to change legislation, and we are hopeful that that will happen within the next few months.
Megan, as a supplementary to that, are we not able to put an emergency hold on things, saying we are aware of some serious fiscal risks to us and we do want to get this sorted, but in the meantime, what we're doing is adding to that fiscal cliff?
No, not that I'm aware of, not under the RMA anyway.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair, and I think I'm making my debut online for a committee, but as you can tell, my voice is almost gone, and whatever I have, I won't share around. I'll speak briefly in the speaking thing about what's just been discussed, because it's not a question, but we have gone through that subject 100 and something times in the last 2 years, sadly. My question is back to the major events, and have spoken to Jazz and the Mayor and others at length about this. Could you please give me the confidence, like you did, Deputy Mayor, that what we are putting forward will show up in budget lines as certainty for at least those 2 summer periods, by the sounds of it. Got this one coming up that's already funded, and the next of major events. But also there are ways that Tātaki can come back to us, so we don't have a Rainbow Games style situation, that they're able to come back and go, we need 4 million for certainty in 2027, 8, and I absolutely support bed tax and want it to happen, but I doubt it's going to happen for 3 years. What certainty for these medium to long run planning? Because I worry we are killing major events and the runway to them if we don't put certainty.
Thank you, Councillor. That is a good question. So that the certainty we can provide is that there is nothing for TAU to look for and prospect for major events. The issue they will have is looking for events that may have multiple commitments, so multi-year commitments, etc. And so for that, we have discussed with the TAU exec and their board an ability to come back to governing body to request funding certainty, or at least something that may look like an underwrite for those types of events. But they do have, with this gap closed in the mayoral proposal, they will have funding certainty to go out and prospect for those events.
And there's an understanding between us and TAU, although we should be all just us, I guess, that they can come back to us if something pops up, and we can make a decision if it needs to come back to, I mean, it's not optimal that it would need to come back to governing body every time, but that they could come back for additional throughout a annual budget year, because, the Lions Fund needs 3 million, or, I just don't want to have events fall over because we can't have certainty. Like over and above this 7 million.
That is correct. That is a discussion that we have had. Yes. Okay.
And the mayoral forum, that is more about, is my understanding that is more about the future of funding and how we address these gaps, rather than the mayoral forum deciding exactly what events move back and forward. Like, we're not creating 2 decision-making bodies. Is that more about the structure and the future, and building towards a bed levy as well?
Yes, I'm sure that the industry that is going to be voluntarily funding this stopgap is involved in also contributing to what major events would be ideal and that we should be looking to attract into Auckland.
Thank you, and thanks, Chair, for changing your F. I was trying to help you there because I know what you're trying to do. But I guess my question for Phil is it's why I said which could include, because I think it's not bad to look into those community. But for other option to increase compliance activity, we did discuss the other day. Are you looking to make, I know Rob and others were looking to make it more transparent what is and isn't happening, and maybe it's more about kind of promoting how and what to do to get this compliance, because sometimes in the areas that people complain about, there actually isn't the phone calls to go off sometimes. So the assumption there's no compliance, where I can see on the dog animal management, you can see where the calls are coming from, thousands in one area, and another area might be 50, 60, and that's why there's a discrepancy sometimes in the resource. That's for Phil Wilson.
Thank you, councillor. Yes, basically, after the local board advocacy, there was a commitment made to look more closely at this feedback to the local boards, and that'll include, you know, exactly what the situation is at the moment, and so on. So yeah, you're exactly on the right path there.
Okay, and just while you're there, the last question, and I can't remember if I asked this in the confidential or not, or it was an open meeting. But the 8 million and the ongoing, could you just give us a quick idea of ongoing, what you're going to have to do? You know, is it sustainable to keep getting you to save these millions here and there?
Well,
Like,
it's not.
yeah, obviously, if we don't make clear what you're needing to find savings and we just keep requesting you 8 million here, 11 million here, things like that, what long term are you going to see a change to that, the way we do that?
Well, as I've talked to councillors about previously, no, it's not sustainable just to keep adding savings targets without, you know, a clear plan around how we're going to address it. Having said that, you know, I am confident based on what we've managed to achieve this year in terms of savings targets and the head start that it's given us into next year. Obviously, the difficulty in terms of articulating this is that my first obligation is to try and pull cost out of the organisation that doesn't have a detrimental effect on service levels. So that goes to overhead costs, changes in the processes that we use in the organisation, and so on. And that's where the priority rightly should be in terms of addressing it. The other thing, just to remind you, the other thing I've said is that, as should be the discipline in any organisation, that we manage costs in terms of run rate through the course of the year to get a favourable end of year result. And that just goes to filling vacancies and so forth during the course of the year. That's a healthy discipline in the organisation. So I can't tell you that we can keep stretching the rubber band infinitely, but I will tell you when I think when we're being unrealistic in terms of savings targets, and we're pretty much at that point now with the absorption of that $8 million additional inflation pressure.
Thank you. So you're confident now with the local board pressures too this year, but next year the new council is going to have to be braver and clearer. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying I'm comfortable for the coming financial year. I believe there will be a problem beyond that we need to address in the next budget round.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, councillor. Thank you for those answers. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Look, I just a little bit, going back a little bit, I just wanted to ask a question of Jazz. I support both the Mayor and Councillor Fletcher's position about being able to deliver something to the public other than just money to help them out. In end of 23, I had a meeting at Auckland Transport with the Chief Executive and some of their senior staff. I have spoken to you, I've spoken to others. Are you aware of anything more than just conversation about how the council family can deliver compliance and etc. and permits to start work in these road corridors without cost? Should I maybe say?
Right. Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor. So I haven't stayed abreast of the work that was happening through the recovery team on that, particularly out west, wasn't it, in terms of the driveways?
Well, it was just everywhere, and I have spoken to the recovery team over time, including Mr. Tucker, who was it Mr. Tucker who was there before, who was the head of who was the head of the recovery first, and he's left now. The guy who was on contract. I've spoken to
Matt Tucker.
Yes, Matt Tucker. Sorry, yeah. So I'm just looking for some sort of evidence that we're genuine in activating these people who have got a problem without us having to deliver money, other than no charge for our compliancing. For instance, at Auckland Transport, if you want to get permission to work inside that road envelope, comes with $1,000 charge up front to make an application. Those sort of things are things I was thinking about.
Look, I'd have to come back to you outside of here with the detail of what's happening and what we can do. I do note that we've made specific provision for each of those affected householders of, I think, $30,000 to assist them with the design, etc. work, so that that element of pain is taken account of in the money that you previously allocated for support for those properties. But I understand the wider point you're making though.
Thank you. But that is within the framework and the events thus far. We have a lot of people that are still, as Councillor Fisher pointed out, that are outside of that or have been in similar situations since the 23 flood. All I'm trying to do, again, supporting Councillor Fletcher and the Mayor, we can't be the place of last insurance, but on the other hand, we could appease some of those concerns in the public by being more proactive and helping them at no charge to get it to get licenses, etc., to start their own work. I'm not saying it fits in here, but I just think it's a time to mention it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
We put out a whole book, which I was involved in writing, of simple things you can do to improve your place. And like not putting fences, solid fences, and to redirect the water all over your house or somebody next door's. And you wonder how many of those people picked up on that stuff. Because there's quite a lot you can do to reduce yourself as well. And we have put out a lot of information. But there's, I get what you're saying, but people have a fair bit of responsibility in themselves sometimes. It's a tough one, but we can't raid the ratepayer door just to fix everybody.
Thanks. Councillor Leone, Karen.
Thank you. Just coming back to the fix and finish fund, I know it's been discussed pretty extensively, but I mean, is it likely to be a cluster approach with the local boards to apply for that funding? Is that how you're thinking of setting it up? Because obviously with the amount of money that's available, it would make sense to do something like that. I'm just wondering, is that something that you've thought about?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, it is open to local boards who are eligible and who have projects that fit the criteria to join together or join together with other parties in order to co-fund and co-deliver a project. I don't know of any of those. None of those have been brought to our attention so far, but if some of those exist, I'm sure if they can fit within the criteria, they're welcome to put that forward.
Thank you. And then just coming back to the 7 million that's been covered and we've been able to find, I know, again, that's already been raised that that's not going to work long term. So what are the risks involved or in terms of the long-term consequences of that, of us being able to find that money now? But, you know, what's the impact of that throughout the year?
So at the moment, there is no, what we believe in closing the gap, there is no short to medium term impact that has been covered through closing that funding gap. In the long term, council does have to consider how it will fund major events and destination marketing. That's not provided for in this mayoral proposal. In our long term plan, we agreed that we would advocate for and look for a bed night levy, which will provide a significant level of available funding for Auckland. Should that not be the case or not in the foreseeable future, we would have to revisit that through either the next annual plan round or the next long-term plan round.
Thank you. And just a last question, with the money that we have been able to use to fill that gap, I just want to make sure that we're not missing out on anything in terms of that money that's covering.
Not that I am aware of at the moment. We are told that we have not missed out on anything as a result of that funding.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of my questions have been asked, which is pretty cool. I just got a couple. So this, I'll ask it to you, Jazz, but the Mayor might want to jump in as well. How close are we to convincing the government around the bed night levy? And second part to that question, have we considered lobbying for a regional decision-making solution for Auckland as opposed to a nationwide solution?
So how close are we? We're probably not that close. And you've heard several government ministers say at the moment it is not on their list of priorities. So, you know, I can't hand on heart say that we're going to get that in the next financial year as such. However, in terms of the advocacy for the regional based solution, that is what we did try. And go for an Auckland first approach. We've had several conversations with the industry who have been quite convincing in saying that the better option perhaps is to look for a nationwide solution that will work so that from an advocacy perspective, the industry can support that. And so from a joint advocacy perspective, should I say, that it will be something that the industry groups, other councils around the country could support rather than an Auckland first approach.
Thank you, councillor, for your questions. Thank you for the answers. Another question? Thank you.
I've got another question.
Oh, sorry.
I
sorry,
said I had a couple.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, you did.
But you know, look, just on that, I mean, it seems like the needs of industry is not enough to convince them on their perceived need for political gain, which, you know, isn't there. So I wonder whether we would just consider revisiting that question in discussions, but maybe I'll talk about it. I've got one last question, and it's kind of related to that. We're putting out communications around our solution once we pass it and the major event stuff. Just wondering if I can sort of request that we collate economic data on Auckland's GDP relating to major events, because it's seen as a nice to have in some quarters, but actually there's jobs on the line and businesses on the line in this discussion. So I'm just wondering if you'd be planning on putting that economic data out in the public.
That's a very good question, councillor. And yes, that is exactly what the industry groups and part of the Mayoral Forum will be looking at, is making sure that we are transparent about the details and data related to the benefits associated with the costs in that activity. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Shane. Councillor Walker.
So I just want to pick up on the issue that was raised around the event funding. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jazz, but you mentioned that in respect of movement on the government, you said we're not that close. I don't know how close, but maybe if it's far out. And then you also mentioned that a better option would be to look for a nationwide solution that would work. Okay, so if we're in a situation where we don't have anything close, and it could be some years off, the question that I've got, and it may replicate the questions of some others, is what is a sustainable source of fund? So is additional funding as next year and the year after, and so on. So why aren't we considering something that's arguably more realistic and sustainable now, rather than what I would suggest is stopgap? So that's a question.
Through the chair. So through the long-term plan process, this council agreed to look for a long-term funding solution in the shape of a bed night levy. That advocacy has fallen short for the time being. However, we are not abandoning that. We are going to still continue doing that, and we are hopeful that the government will come to the party, listening to the industry, listening to our council and other councils around the country saying there's a dire need to fund sustainably the tourism and major events activity. So that still exists. As part of this annual plan, we needed to do a funding, fill a funding gap, which we have, and that allows TAU to keep going with that attraction in Auckland. As I have mentioned to Councillor Leone, we will have to look at the next annual plan round, and obviously in the long-term plan as well, about what those funding solutions would be if we get no closer to a midnight levy. So those are for future funding.
Okay, so I hear
processes.
that. So my further question is, what effort are we putting into engaging with other councils around a nationwide strategy, given that we accept that it's not ours alone? Are we putting some effort in there, and are we committing some budget to that?
So the answer is yes, and working with the industry group, and we're hoping with the Mayoral Forum that will be set up, we will make sure that we have been in touch with a number of other councils around the country. The Mayor has met with the Mayor of Rotorua and discussed this as well. So there are works underway, and we will hope to make you aware of some of that activity as well.
Okay, and the other question I've got just picks up, I think, from the response from the Chief Executive around, finding savings and efficiency in terms of the application of this fund. Given, I think, as you said earlier, that we need to have a much better working relationship with the people that have a direct interest in events. That's the hospitality sector, Eden Park, players like that. Have we explored a facility that would make savings where Auckland Unlimited is not involved, and allied to that, the issue that they have a conflict of interest because they're making the decision around where funding goes for events in venues that they run, and they've got a clear conflict of interest? And is it not conceivable that we could have a more efficient, effective, and economical arrangement with the sector?
Through the chair, look, I don't, I'm not sure I agree with those comments. I know that TAU works across a number of different events, which also includes working with the likes of Eden Park. Certainly, and I attended a launch event for the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo, which I know that TAU are supporting to be at Eden Park. So they are working across industry and working across other venue operators and promoters, etc. So for the benefit of Auckland. And I do take your point, though, that there is an opportunity to bring a lot more collaborative activity into the sector and have the voices a little bit more clearly heard in terms of the types of events and attraction that they need to, or that Auckland Council group needs to be looking at.
And in respect of conflict of interest, do you agree they have a conflict of interest?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not prepared to comment on that.
And that's a pecuniary conflict of interest. So no comment. Okay, I've got another question, Mr. Chair, and that goes, if it's appropriate, to the waste management targeted rate. It's appropriate to ask questions across the proposal. Okay. So we had a lot of submitters, 81% of the opposition centering around the inability to opt out of the targeted rate. This is for the bin collection. And the response is, I think, that we're not going to consider that option because we didn't go out with it as an option.
Wayne, I've just, sorry, listening to your question, that's fine, but I think we'll ask that in the next item. Okay, under the fee, probably more appropriate than just hearing your question rather than,
okay,
and we'll have the right staff.
Okay, there's a bit of confusion as to which option we're on.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
That's
right. That's right.
You get my drift, you can start preparing for it.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Very good. Thank you. Councillors, that brings us to the conclusion of the question. So I'd like to open up for any comments. Councillor Walker.
Yes, I mean, my comment, if it's appropriate to comment on the event funding, Mr. Chair, is that we'd be far better off having something much more nimble, much more representative of the sector that frankly knows better than us and Auckland Unlimited around where the money could be better spent. We'd save some money there. We're desperate to save some money in this area, and we really want to get the best result possible. My continuing concern is that Auckland Unlimited have a conflict of interest. It is a pecuniary conflict of interest, so it's more substantial than just something that's dealing with other than money. And I think we could be better served. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Speaking orders, councillor Ferry, councillor Simpson, and councillor Williamson. Oh, and Glenn. Sorry, I've got you as well, Glenn. I'll take you after councillor Ferry.
Kia ora, Chair, I'm a little bit concerned that we've just had quite a serious allegation made against a CCO in open committee, so I think it probably needs to be addressed at some point. That wasn't what I put my hand up to speak to, but yeah, maybe think about that and I'll say my piece, if that's all right. So I think what I wanted to reflect on with this budget is that this is kind of the first normal budget we've had for a while. It's been many years of real struggle to get to a normal budget. And congrats to everybody who's been part of that. I've, of course, only been here for the last couple, but observed the others from local board land. And while this one has some tricky parts, by and large, it's landed reasonably well. What I wanted to point out was a couple of things that we really need to highlight from this budget as we think about the next budget and the next LTP, which is the need for some sustainability in a few particular funding areas, one being the bed night levy, which we've talked about. The other being the issue around this ongoing, as in A3, every year expecting savings, which the CEO has already pointed out and we've discussed. So I think those two, we really need to find long-term sustainable solutions, and we're not finding them today. We're continuing on today, and I think that's good. But we do need to really turn our minds to those for the future. In terms of the bed night levy specifically, I think we have some real opportunity here. We have a central government no at the moment, but we do have the idea of us being given a mechanism that would allow us to do it for ourselves, which I think is a very pragmatic response. And I'm aware that the opposition spokesperson for Auckland has publicly said that they do support the bed night levy. So that's another opportunity for us. The final thing I wanted to mention was something else that we need to get sustainable investment nailed on is stormwater, ongoing stormwater investment. This is a drum I've banged for some years, and I think we've had a bit of a conversation today about that, but we do need to keep that front of mind for the future. We need to not lose focus on it just because it's been a few years since the big floods. We are going to continue to have those targeted floods, and we need to keep stormwater investment front of mind. So I will be supporting this budget, but wanted to point out those three areas that I think we need to continue to work on and talk about seriously for the next budget and the next LTP. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I think the Mayor would like to respond.
I wouldn't mind answering some of those, councillor Ferry. They're good. Well,
maybe you could address it when you speak to the item at the end before we vote.
Okay, we'll do that. But thank you very much because I'm just making a note of them. But they're good points.
Very good. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Julie. That's good guidance. And Councillor Walker, just some clarification on the.
Sure. So just to be clear, I wasn't referring to pecuniary interest as it applies to an individual, because that's generally the context that applies to. So if I gave that impression, that was incorrect. The impression that I am wanting to put forward is we have an entity that is involved with the distribution of money, and it happens to be distributing it to part of its operation. And that is a concern that I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, councillor. Glenn.
Thank you, Chair. E tautu anau i te kaupapa. I mean, the Haukura supports the kaupapa. And we mihi to the staff and you councillors who have worked with Haukura and with mana whenua and Māori in general to come up with this budget. E mihi ana kia koutou mo tēnā. I have a little concern about F. As a person who's done most of the bylaws in Auckland, I have visions of volunteers chasing packs of volunteers chasing stray dogs around. It's not something that I'd personally be liking to see. So I want to see how F spans out when you do that kaupapa. And also, I just need to remind you that, councillors, that mana whenua have had the ability, this council has had the ability to empower mana whenua under section 33 of the RMA to carry out a lot of work that council does and never has done it. So, you know, I'd like to see where mana whenua come in this F corridor as well. Nō reira mihi ana kia koutou, kia ora.
Yeah, thank you. And you've taken that on board, Glenn. That's very helpful direction. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Councillors, it's a good budget and I'm very happy to support it. The points I want to make around the budget is I know that it says we have a $47 million savings target, but actually the budget for savings in this budget is 176 million. 176 million, because of course it includes the enduring 90 million from the LTP plus the additional target from last year's LTP of 39. So it really is proving to Aucklanders that we are committed to making our organisation more leaner. Yes, it is getting harder, and I say that to our Chief Executive and our CFO, but I really commend the work that you are doing in that space. I think combined with the efficiencies that we will get from the better value project principles, and your worship, you are to be commended for those principles because they are making a big difference. I think, as I've said, this will show Aucklanders we are serious about looking after ratepayer money and there are more opportunities. For me, the key metric is reducing the percentage of council's income that comes from rates and diversifying our income streams. So I'm happy to see the decisions that we took into the LTP coming to fruition. I mean, we're already going to get 38 million in returns from the Auckland Future Fund in this budget, which compares to by my estimate to about 10 million we would have got if we'd held onto the airport shares and got their dividend. We've done well out of that and it will only get better. Next year's projection is for 100 million from that fund, 69 million of which will be paid to council as per the fund policy. This is an outstanding result and I think congratulations to the Mayor for this initiative in establishing that fund. I'm also pleased that we have not deviated from our promise of a 5.8% rates rise projected in the LTP. Sticking to the LTP gives ratepayers certainty that our planning is good and that we can manage our finances year to year, even though we have impacts from the external environment. It's also one of the lowest in the country. And while some councils are yet to make their decisions, we know that Hamilton was looking at 15, Christchurch at 9 and Wellington at 12%. The fact that we sit at less than 6% is testament to our good decision making and the hard work of staff to respond to savings. It also means that our percentage from rates for our next annual plan will be 30%. This year it's 35%. So I know there will be some fluctuations, but 30% of our income for this next annual budget will come from rates, and that is to be commended. But at the same time, we're also still investing significantly in infrastructure. We obviously have the big ticket items on our books like CRL, Central Interceptor and Eastern Busway, but of course more of that as well. We are also looking after future residents by investing in our blue, green and stormwater networks and beginning to transform the way we get around with sensible investments in transport to improve productivity of both roads and enhance our bus fleet with electric buses. As many of you know, I'm the lead councillor for Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, so I've been taking a keen interest as to how we are going to fund major events in the future. Some may look at the gap we have of 7 million and think that's not a lot in the context of a $3 billion capex and a $2 billion OPEX across the council group. However, this is a big deal for Auckland because it's about the size, it's about what kind of city we want it to be. We put in around 16.5 million to bidding for and delivering major events and attracting tourism. But compared to cities like Adelaide, who have a population of 1.4 million, put in almost 10 times that amount of 135 million. If we want Auckland to grow beyond just being a large provincial city, we need to take this part of our investment seriously. So I'm pleased that we have a solution in this budget for the gap for next year, and I thank the Mayor for putting together a solution that allows us to keep talking to government about a longer term solution. But I don't want us to forget the wider context. If we want to be seen as a major hub in the Australasian region for events, we are going to need to up the game in future years. 13,000 pieces of feedback we received on this budget, which is a record for a non-LTP, and that in itself is a major achievement. So I congratulate all the councillors that have gone out securing interest from their communities. So, Mayor, I commend the budget to this chamber, and I'm pleased to lend my wholehearted support to it. I'd like to thank you, staff across the organisation, and your office for contributing to our final version. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I agree with the Deputy Mayor. I totally support the budget, and I think we've done better than nearly anybody else in the country, so we should be very pleased with that. I just want to raise one point about the question I was raising before. If we knew about a fiscal, moral, ethical, I don't know, health and safety hazard that occurred, that existed out there, we should get legal advice as to whether we can take unilateral action immediately to put in place a stop until we can either put a ring fence around the site if it's a health and safety issue or whatever it is, and not be bound by, well, the law says, if we're aware of it, I think we have a moral obligation to do something about it. And I'd love to be in court arguing with somebody who says, oh, you stopped getting a building consent to me, when I say, well, we know that you're building in a place that will flood even in a modest rainfall and cause unbelievable harm to families. You should see the look on the face of some people when we've explained to them, here's some photos with kayaks floating past their window and you've just bought that apartment. I just think we have a moral obligation as a council to say, take action now, stop those consents being made where we know they are in a place of serious problem, and get some legal advice from our legal people if necessary about whether we can actually breach the law. I'd be comfortable going along, and I hope everyone else say, yes, Judge, it's against the law. And we did it because we have got no other obligation. We cannot sit quiet and let this happen. And so I'm worried about future budgets. This budget's been put to bed and great. But the fiscal risk we are posing on this council for further claims is ginormous at present with what is going on in our area. There's buildings going on in places where floodwaters rise up to 2.5 metres above the ground level. And the poor sods building these and buying them, when you tell them, here's some photos of what the flooding last time looked like with a modest rainstorm, I've seen people crying. And I don't think it's good enough to say to them, well, the trouble is the law says we can't. I think you would intervene in a particular incident if you were in a supermarket and saw someone acting and even did something illegal to stop them creating serious damage and harm to other people. You'd take the risk of what the judge might, well, okay, I think in this case it was beneficial. And I would just love to get some legal advice to this body as fast as we can, take it to the governing body. Can we stand on a ground of it is taking too long for the government to tell us when they are going to sort it out and give us some relief. So we are going to take some unilateral action now to prevent any fiscal cliff in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, before I begin on the sort of mayoral proposal stuff specifically, just commenting on the floodplain stuff really briefly in terms of consenting. I mean, we've had, I don't know how many workshops, at least 10 workshops on this. So I'm quite surprised at the surprise in this discussion. We've had plenty of time to bring up the points that have been raised. And ultimately, we're beholden to the government. So no one here, I believe, actually wants to consent in floodplains, especially when we've got foreseeable risk, right? We're all on board with that. So I just encourage anyone that has friends in government to help us out in fixing the problem, because that's where the blockage is. And it's been long canvassed. We've been talking about this for months in workshops, so I'm not quite sure what's going on here. But moving on to the actual proposal. Look, I have been pushing this barrow a little bit for a while in terms of the major event fund, trying to argue that we should have a bespoke situation for Auckland as opposed to a national solution. Now, I understand the industry don't feel the same way, so that's fine, and they know their industry more than I do. Some of them do, okay, sure. But yeah, some of them, they know their industry more than I do, so I'm not disputing that bit either. But for me, just looking at it, look, I think it's just such a clean, simple, sensible solution for the government to simply walk into Parliament and pass enabling legislation. They could do it under urgency. They've been doing that a bit recently, to allow Auckland Council to actually do the work and impose it. We can handle it all, right? If there's a worry about the political risk, I don't know why, but if there's a worry about the political risk, let us handle it. Because I'm happy in October to stand in front of West Aucklanders and say, that thing that you told us to do, we did it, right? You asked us to do it and we did it, right? I don't understand the political risk here, but there apparently is one. Let us handle it. That would be my suggestion, because we have a mandate from the public to act on this. We do as a body, both in the election last time and through the results of this feedback, which were stunning and really welcome. I thought it was really great. So yeah, pass it on to us. That'd be my message. Look, because the public support of the bed night levy here is quite significant, it should be celebrated, and I'm just delighted to see it. I think it's really forward thinking and really great that the people of Auckland have told us to get on with it. Aucklanders want major events. They want this fixed. They understand the economic importance of the events to our city, which bring in many more millions to the city's economy than we spend. I think there's data out there on BCRs, but it is absolutely stunning that you spend money on events, you get your money back tenfold. And it's more than that as well. It's about ambition for a city. Just echoing the Deputy Mayor's comments, which I thought were excellent, we should be competing in the Asia Pacific region as a proud city for events and entertainment. You know, places like Adelaide and Brisbane, they're our competition, and we've got to see it that way. But we're hamstrung by red tape and by legislative things that I simply don't understand why we can't move it. If we don't solve this problem, the counterfactuals, if we don't solve it, we're leaving tens of millions of dollars of economic growth on the table at a time that we can't afford to do that. We're affecting the jobs and the businesses of Aucklanders. Thousands of jobs, potentially. So I really applaud the temporary solution here and the flexible thinking involved, and I really want to thank the Mayor for that, who's been working so hard on this issue. I just stress that the pipeline for events is years in the making, right? And anyone kind of layperson like me thinking about the major events industry, think of how far in advance things like World Cups are announced, things like Olympics and Commonwealth Games, things like that. They're announced years in advance, right? And it's the same for concerts and stuff too. They're worked on way behind the scenes for ages, right? So we've got to fix this. And we need permanent solutions also to give the market confidence that we can be trusted as a city. We're going to host your event, we're going to do our part, and it's going to be fantastic, just like all the other events that we've hosted in the past. So, you know, I echo the refreshing feeling of the budget as well that Councillor Ferry mentioned. It is a lot more normal than any that I've been involved in this table. And part of that is putting the work in the previous 2 years of this term on fixing our finances, on fixing the holes that have built up, and on getting things back on the right track. And I want to acknowledge everyone here for that. I'm very, very proud of this term in terms of its finances. Hopefully in the future, we'll move from a response mode where we're sort of whack-a-mole dealing with budget emergencies here and there that crop up, to actually looking forwards with a vision for Auckland's future generations and what they need. I think in the future, things like moving on the cost of living on households, these are the things we've got to look at more, such as further action on the cost of transport. That's something we need to look at in the future. But at the moment, like, I'm really proud of this, and I think a lot of work has gone into this, and I thank the Mayor, I thank his staff, I thank all of us, and I commend the proposal. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I want to depart a little bit from some of my colleagues here. If this is the new normal, I'm not sure that a lot of Aucklanders, particularly those on fixed incomes, will share a similar view. And I put that in the context of the comments made by the Auditor General's report when their office looked at the various long-term plans of all the councils in New Zealand, and that was just very recently. And they said councils are increasing rates at historically high levels to pay for investment in infrastructure. Councils are also increasing their debt to some of the highest levels in decades. The consequences of that was the Auditor General saw that these factors create risk to councils' long-term financial sustainability and your ability to respond to unforeseen events. And I tried to translate that to some of the figures that have come out in recent years with our council. If we look at rate rises, for instance, 2023, it was 7.7%. That added another to the average property, that added another $253. 2024 was 6.8%, added another $245. 25 this year, 5.8 adds another 223, cumulatively 20.3% increase over those 3 years. And at the same time, Watercare, of course, is adding about 7.2% to the water bill. So all up, the total rates for average properties now goes over $4,000 for the first time, $4,068. A business average business 22,123. That's up 1,408. So these are substantial increases. And if we do a little bit of comparison, certainly I admit in different financial climate, but one with challenges too. In the previous 2 terms of council, the first term it was a 2.5% average, and in the last 3 from 2020 to 2022 it was a 4.7% average. The inflation rate at the moment is 2.5%. We're pretty close to the CPI, I think. Yet, our rates increases are 2 or 3 times above that. And I just wonder what that does to people on, fixed incomes, superannuants, living alone, 27 grand after tax, a couple, 21,000. If you add our average rate along with the Watercare average rate, that's over $5,000 now, and a fixed income of in the 20,000s. I don't quite sure how people are able to get by on that. The other point that the Auditor General talked about was the level of indebtedness. In the case of Auckland Council, 2022, our level of debt was 11.1 billion. Next year, it's forecast to hit over 15.6 billion. That's over 4.5 billion increase. The interest payments go from about 619 now to 702 million next year. That's nearly $2 million a day. The increase in group interest costs have gone up over 228 million during the term of this council. So that wouldn't be so bad if that indebtedness wasn't also accompanied by the sale of big assets like the airport shares, which brought in nearly $1 billion. So goodness knows if 835 million for the first 7% tranche. So for me, that puts us in the invidious position. We're already, as a council, historically, Auckland Council accounts for over 50% of all the local government debt in New Zealand. The trajectory I see ourselves on there doesn't seem to be allaying that route any at all. In terms of the public, we hear a lot of talk about ratepayers. We have a little
kind of trite phrases like doing more for less for me. And, you know, notwithstanding the good stuff that does happen, I'm not going to be a total negative Nelly. It seems to be more a case of less for more. So we raise bigger debt for less actually getting delivered on the ground. That's my experience. And as I said, I'm grateful for what is delivered across Auckland, but I don't think that trajectory is sustainable, as the Auditor General says. And in those circumstances, you do have to be very careful. If you're imposing that sorts of rates imposition and debt imposition on people, then you have to be very careful to be seen to be walking the talk. And I certainly acknowledge Councillor Lee in that respect in pursuing some of the kind of lavish spending that has punctuated some of the arrangements with consultants. I think it could go further. It was rather disappointing to me to see that we still have people jetting off in business class trips to Brazil and places for $19,000, paying $1,400 a night for accommodation. I think in the current context, that isn't sustainable either, and is certainly not defensible in terms of the rates and positions that are being put on people. So in summation then, Mr. Chair, I, like the Auditor General's Office, I share similar concerns as to the long-term financial sustainability. I think the figures reflect that, and certainly that will be reflected in my vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hill's online.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I understand how the flooding and stuff came up, but I do feel a little insane when we've been talking, I think it was maybe 2 weeks after, or less, 2nd of February, so it must have been a week after the first floods, 2023. Councillor Dalton and I put forward a huge range of requests. It was reported back in March 2023 of what we could legally do, what we couldn't legally do, any possible ways we could do moratoriums on flooding, etc., etc. We got a huge number of reports over time, of advice. Then I think we had 15 workshops so far. We've written to both ministers of the previous government, the current government, met with them a number of times. We all have concerns about this, but we cannot stop private property rights without a law change, which spoken to the Select Committee a number of times, spoken to the National Adaptation Plan, and the inquiry, not fast enough, but we cannot do what people think we can do under the law. We will just end up straight in the Environment Court or High Court, and they will overturn it because that's the Building Act and the RMA that we have to abide by. What we have been doing is changing some of our restrictions, such as the 3.8 levels of warming, which actually developers are saying is too stringent and is putting the requirements of lifting floor plates and different things are too expensive and adding to the cost of housing. So once we put this plan change out, when the government changed the law, it will go out to the public, and there will be many people potentially who don't like it because it will be lowering the price of their property potentially. There will be places where we're putting the restrictions on properties that will lower the price of the property. So that's also what we have to consider and why we need to consult to reduce the harm in those areas, but also give people a say on their properties, which won't be an easy conversation on any side of the thing. And what Councillor Walker says is really disappointing to say that Tātaki has some sort of conflict. I think there's only been one major event at Go Media from the Major Event Fund, and that was Pearl Jam. Tātaki is leading the work with Nick in Eden Park on Edinburgh Tattoo, which is now 3 nights. 2.5 million from the Major Events Fund went to FIFA, which I think was, 10 nights or so, sold out nights at Eden Park. Pink, funding went into Pink. Coldplay, Luke Combs, all came from the Major Events Fund, straight from Tātaki. The long list of other events like the ASB Classic and Symphony and millions of dollars on other events who are not in Tātaki related venues. So please just look at the facts. The fact is this Major Event Fund helps all our venues and stadiums, but it actually just helps Aucklanders. And I think I said that a couple of weeks ago. We just need to work together on what Aucklanders expect. my next point is my concern about this long-term funding. I don't think the government is going to support a bed night levy anytime soon, and I do worry about the runway. Australia is leaving us for dead. I think Queensland is putting in about the state government is putting in about $40 million a year to attract major events until the Olympics. They are, and then the other state governments are competing. We are not competing with 7, 10, 20 even million, and we're not getting there. So we need to be careful that we could lose a whole, 5, 6 years of major events to the city and all the jobs and impact that comes with that if we don't get something over the line quickly. So I'm happy, and thank you, Mayor and others who've found this money to ensure we have that certainty for the current runway, but prospecting for new, I'm very concerned about that still. And lastly, I will just say, yeah, thank you for the slightly normal budget. It is still, yes, a difficult rise for the public, but we have a lot of concerns around this table about what we can do or can't do on our debt, as I've got Ross to explain 1,000 times. Our decisions are cut over $1 billion worth of capital this year. So that's water care, transport, everything, or put up the rates 50%, or put that on debt. So we choose to put it on debt as the most affordable way of doing it, and not, we are well behind on infrastructure. We've seen the stories in the media, months and months of it. If we don't invest by borrowing and getting the development contributions, we have to put it on rates, or we just don't do it. So unless someone's brave enough to put up the rates 50%, to fund the infrastructure that we're borrowing for this year, I doubt that's going to happen. So, more solutions focused, but I'm glad this is a little bit more straightforward than has been the last 5 years. There have been lots of cuts, lots of other cost increases. This is still difficult for our residents, but they expect us to be doing and investing in the things and the services they want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Well, that was loud. Okay, Councillor Leone.
Okay. Look, I do just want to touch on comments that have been made. Obviously, the positive is that our rates are low. We have saved money and we've had minimal job losses for this budget in comparison to the first year when we all started on this term. I mean, I know there was a 300 million budget hole, and it was, it was really difficult to work through that budget, and we've got to where we are now. But I want to talk about, the cost of living and the impact that that is also having on Aucklanders, and the information that we're hearing constantly about, people paying their rates. And although we're keeping our rates low, the reality is Aucklanders are still really struggling. I'm concerned about the fact that we have saved an extensive amount of money. And while we have pulled back on things like contractors and gone back out to market, I feel that, there is still some part of the council where it is treated like an open credit card in some ways. And I feel like we still need to be pulling back on that. So the Revenue Committee has been doing really well on that. The transparency to Aucklanders, I know reflecting on this budget, it's all about the Mayor's budget, but it's also been able to say with what we've come up with is clear enough that we're able to actually be transparent with Aucklanders about how we're spending that money. And I still don't feel that we've quite hit that. But I do constantly tell people on a regular basis that, the budget that we provide for Aucklanders, I feel that, central government is providing education and health, and we're pretty much doing everything else. That's what I advocate for anyway, in terms of the money that we are spending on Aucklanders every day, all of our pools, parks, everything else for our families. And this budget is such an important part of the everyday lives of Aucklanders. I just want to come back to the major events. Glad that we've been able to work through that. But we know that that is not going to be a long-term fix, and we need to come up with something that is actually going to address that long-term. I don't think that central government is going to come to the table. That's been raised a number of times. And we have to be realistic about how we can actually achieve that going forward. So I do commend that we've been able to land this budget where we have without too much stress and trauma. But I believe that there's still a lot more that this council needs to do in the future in terms of addressing some of the issues that are happening within council. Kia ora.
Good, thank you, councillor. Councillor Pupaina.
Tēnā koe he mana. Look, I've already said what I needed to say at previous budget workshops, and even in open. I will be supporting the recommendations. I am comforted, for want of a better term, that the CEO will be looking at, in particular, work around F. I have said and asked part-I and given whakaaro questions and comments around the fix and finish fund. And, you know, for me, yeah, look, it is what it is. We've still got the 26th of June, where we have the governing body meeting. But I will be, Greg, as US chair, will be supporting those recommendations that you have up there. My last comment is to you, Chair. I want to acknowledge you. With all the budget committee workshops that we've had and the budget committee open agendas and meetings, you have chaired it and have been inclusive. And I just want to acknowledge that because I'm unsure when our next budget committee is, but if this is your last one, I want to acknowledge your work through all the workshops, through all the work that you have put in front of us, but also chaired us. So I do that. Ngā mihi kia koe to you, Greg. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you, Alf. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. I sit here listening to all this. I acknowledge what the Mayor does with trying to fix Auckland and trying to analyse jobs in retrospect and work out where we're going wrong. But I also agree with Councillor Watson. You know, we're spending $5 billion a year, I understand, and we're not drilling down on what we really need to do to make the savings to fix those long-term problems. I can just run some figures off my head for the natural environment targeted rate, figures that I couldn't get out of council, but that through Legoimas, volunteers got and broke down, and I got those people to present these figures to the Parks Committee at our last Parks Committee meeting. Council has not challenged those figures in the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks since that meeting. So the natural environment target rate has collected $199 million, 199.5 since its inception 7 years ago. Only 167 million point something has been spent. There's 30 something million that we need to find. We've got 32 million has been spent on park tracks. 18 million of that has been spent on regional park tracks and 13 million on local park tracks. Of the 18 million, 5.9 million has been spent on tracks which are still closed or partially closed. 3.6 million on tracks which are closed. These are the figures we need to be really drilling down on to get ourselves away or back up from that $15.6 billion debt by the end of this year. I will vote for this. There's a couple of things I will want my noted against, but we need to keep working on the small nuts and bolts minutiae of fixing Auckland. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Walking up Queen Street this morning, I came across a big crowd waiting outside Smith & Coe's. And standing in the crowd, rather forlornly, was Tony Coe, the former chair of the company and the descendant of Marianne Coe, the founder, who established the business 145 years ago. It kind of This was a closing down sale after 145 years. And it, in some ways, epitomises Auckland of today, very sadly. In 2022, start of this term, Aucklanders voted for change. They voted in a mayor, a leader who promised to fix Auckland, who claimed to be an expert in fixing things. I have to say that he and this council have fallen short in terms of change, certainly in terms of fixing things. What we have had actually is GOF2. And so what we are voting for, really how it will impact people, is to bump up the rates to a record $3 billion. And at the same time, I understand the debt, which will be a burden for future generations of Aucklanders, will go up to $15.6 billion. When you think about it, the debt was 11.1 billion at the start of the term, or at least in 2022. And despite the controversial sale of the airport shares, it's gone up by, say, $4 billion. Now, I haven't worked out the interest that will cost every day, and how it will impact on families of Auckland having to pay this debt. Coming back to Queen Street again, I think it symbolises what's going wrong in the whole region under this council. There's a huge amount of disruption that's gone on for years. Again, let's call it GOF2. AT have piled on to the City Rail Link project, which in itself is something of a disaster in terms of time and cost efficiency, and added on a whole lot of extra work and disruption. The idea to have everything perfect by the time the CRL finally opens after 10 years. 10 years for 3.4 kilometres, 2 tunnels, probably about $2 billion a kilometre, a kind of a record, a world record in the worst sense. And this council has done very little to correct what was already a project that was being managed very poorly. What we know about it was accidentally released and published in the media earlier this year, in which the chief executive expressed fears that the project was in severe danger, and that executives from the French construction company were flying post haste to New Zealand to try and give some reassurance. And then the whole story was closed down. But the CRL, when it was first proposed, and I was a champion for it, was meant to enhance the quality of life of 21st century Auckland, to make it even better. Now it's seen almost desperately as a lifesaver for the inner city. However, the expectations that thousands of people will come pouring back into this central city after the CRL opens may be misplaced. Currently, our public transport effort is failing. It's 11% below what we achieved before the pandemic, and the costs of it have gone up by 30%, which is hardly sustainable, especially so that rail is about 30% down of what it was before the pandemic. 21 million trips per year in 2019, 13.8 million trips per year, or about that now. And so the future doesn't look that particularly bright after 3 years of fixing things.
Mike, if we can wrap it up.
Okay, so I will wrap up, Mr. Chair. The fact of the matter is we're fiddling around the edges, and the major problems in this council are not being tackled at all. The complete inefficiency of procurement in particular is not being tackled at all. Projects go on for years when they should take a few short months. And going back to poor bloody Smith and Coe's, there is the road dug up in Wellesley Street for well over a year, and it's not going to be finished until next year. And what is the purpose? To block Wellesley Street from private vehicles accessing Queen Street. That really sums up what is wrong with this council and with this particular budget. Thank you very much.
Okay, if there's no more comments, I'm going to hand over to the, apparently you've had a turn at talking, Mike, Wayne, sorry, yeah, and then, because I want to give the Mayor the right of the last kind of comment, so Councillor Newman.
Okay, thanks for that. No, not yet.
After Councillor Newman.
Look, I just, sorry I was late here this morning, Mr. Chairman, but I was listening to the questions and the answers online. It has been quite instructive. Some of this information has been very helpful in clarifying how we have arrived at the point we're at. I'll be supporting the annual plan budget, but some remarks from me. I think the discussion around B, the OPEX, it's a bit of a statement, isn't it, about the gap between the political narrative around we need to achieve the sort of savings to meet the cost of the major events and where the savings come from. In reality, I think that B is a solution, but it's not a sustainable long-term solution, is it? There is, I think, some pretty palpable silence when it comes to, I've made some inquiries with the officers for a list of the savings proposed by the elected members to try and make the $7 million. And I would yield my time to anybody who wishes to outline what their proposals were. Guess what, Mr. Chair? I wouldn't have to yield any time whatsoever. The fact is that what we're talking about is from the city centre targeted rate, some reserves from TAU, some voluntary contributions from the industry, and the mayoral office budget covering it. Now, Your Worship, I'm far be it for me to say that you should rightly be on stage with Taylor Swift for that, but you are making a contribution, and you're entitled to some recognition around that. But ultimately, from the very first day that Mayor Goff said, well, what we should have an accommodation provided targeted rate, and that will give us the moral authority to persuade central government. It didn't work on Paula Bennett, it didn't work on Grant Robertson, and it doesn't appear to be working on this minister either. So we do have a challenge, and it's going to be something that is going to need to be covered off, because I actually think that the real savings here in the last few years have been identified and baked in by the chief executive and by Ross Tucker. And they are rightly saying, well, actually, that's not going to be sustainable for much longer. So one thing I'm very clear about, I do not support hiking general rates to cover costs such as this, because Goff proposed that we would take that funding off the general rates, and that's what we did. So you can't put it back in. It has to come from somewhere else. I think that I want to acknowledge the establishment of the Auckland Future Fund, which is now up and going, and that's great. I think that that's a real highlight from this term, actually. And I do want to acknowledge the board of the Auckland Future Fund, to acknowledge Councillor Fletcher for her stewardship as the councillor liaison. I think that that is a success, and certainly demonstrates better stewardship from this council than I've seen from a number of councils around the country with their proposed rate increases. I do want to reflect the fact that the fairer funding, I'm very supportive of fairer funding, but the no disadvantage clause in this budget is a 1-year offer only, and there are challenges coming, which once again, I'm not sure if anybody's identifying the operating savings, but the no disadvantage funding means that whoever's here in the next term is going to have some very difficult conversations with the board. But one thing that I am clear about is I want to see contestability with respect to fix and finish, because I do want those local boards that are perceived to have been winners under fairer funding helping to pony up with some of the funding to offer it back as their contribution to fix and finish. So I do want to support contestability. I think the notion of an equitable carve up is going to be very hard to sustain. This has to be something where these projects are offered and considered on their merits. So I'll vote for this, Chair, but I think that some of the operating savings narrative around this does need to be put in the context. The savings is largely coming from the organisation being good steward, and there is no free credit cards floating around. I don't want to even leave the idea on the table that the chief executive's running the organisation where there are P cards floating where charges are being whacked up. That's not happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any more comments before I go to the Mayor? I'm online. Okay, very good. Over to you, Wayne.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. I'll attempt to answer that range of sensible questions and loud polemics. First of all, Councillor Ferry got onto sustainable solutions, which is in fact the very thing that I've been doing to fix things, actually. We have a future fund, which is a good thing. The bed night levy is a sustainable long-term thing, as is the accommodation rate. But the accommodation rate was unbelievably unpopular with the very set of people who were paying it, who are quite happy to pay the bed night levy. The group shared services is a continuing source of ongoing savings and will be continuing for a long time. The increased dividends from the port are a continuing and ongoing reduction in costs. I heard on the radio this morning, asking in response to some truck drivers saying it was disgusting they're putting up the rates. The disgusting thing was the taxpayers funded a port that was sitting on $6 billion worth of land and providing nothing back to us. That was what's disgusting. And in terms of the trucks are being charged time of use charging, and that'll increase to get them to drive at night. We've got empty roads at night. So I'm proud of those things. The 10 capital rules are an ongoing tool which will provide sustainable savings every year, every time we do it. And every time I look around something, I uncover a stone and Slater's right out. Yesterday, or last week, we discovered a monumental waste of money on the City Rail Link. And the City Rail Link was signed up for by some people here years before I came on here. And I told them I'd be $1 billion over before I arrived. So I'm not going to accept any responsibility for that. That wasn't fixing that. It was mucked up at the very start. We've got one of which I'll show you. We'll take to your committee shortly, which makes a $65,000 stairs at Milford look quite a good investment. And this comes from the City Rail Link. In terms of our debt is a percentage of assets. Major companies around the world like Rocket Lab increase their debt as they increase their value. So debt going up is not a problem. Debt compared to assets going up and ours is coming down. When we sold the future fund, that money became an asset, which reduces our shares. We're at 17% of assets. The government would be delighted to be even within 50% of that. Tomorrow, the other thing you were wondering about, stormwater issues. Tomorrow we are having a very complicated and probably long and difficult debate about the development contributions, which is the solution to that. People on some sides we've got to make savings, but we're not. But the other people tell us we've got to build pipes. So you have to build the pipes. So you can't build pipes without money. And if you're adding a value with the pipe, and you get some debt against that, that's okay. Tomorrow, the development contributions will be a very thoughtful. I commend that you read it carefully. There's complicated pages out there for you to read for tomorrow, but that will answer some of that. In terms of our rate rises, they're still the last in the country. And a lot of the costs have come from decisions made years before. We've had, with regard to the bed night levy, the pressure will come on the government next time. They've got an election in a year's time. Just don't forget that. And they've got 65% of Aucklanders say they want to have this. Just see how brave they are then. It is a sustainable solution. We have some major subsidies. Subsidies from ferries from up north, for instance, are at an outrageous rate. Those have to be looked into. We have, and I don't want to get into the small stuff, but it was raised by one or two people. I have managed to make a saving of $500,000 out of the Mayor's office, which is going towards filling the gap in somewhere else. Events. So events, what I'm saying is that I'm making so. I don't see why some of the local boards haven't offered up some savings to go towards that. They're entitled to actually make a saving. It was raised about the trip to Brazil, which came out of my budget, should produce a $2 billion profit to the country if the government just changes one stupid visa. And last but not least, I haven't had any free trips to Eden Park. So I'm very proud of this budget. It's not easy. As far as rate rises go to, just the last thing to remember is cumulative rate rises are a hell of a lot less than cumulative house price increases. So as a percentage of what you're sitting on, they're going down. So don't forget that as well. I think it's a very good budget. I'm quite proud of it. I think, and I think that the fact that we've got through the public mostly in favour of this, and even our community local boards mostly in favour of this, it's very good. We haven't had people marching the street because we've closed CABs or anything like that. We're managing all these things under these pressures. So I'll be disappointed for those people who don't vote for this, but I'm hoping that we will have a substantial majority to do this, because this has been hard work. And I would also like to thank everybody who's contributed in a positive way and attended all those many workshops. We started on this as soon as we finished the last thing, and I imagine the first thing after the next election, for those of us who get back, will be to start consultation in the next round. Oh, and by the way, I've just read in the paper that Councillor Stewart is retiring, and I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank you for your 30 years of excellent work, and your 30 years of work to try and save the poor people at Howick.
She hasn't told her kids, shush.
From getting wet.
I'll read it in the Herald tomorrow.
Oh, well, I just found out when I had it pointed out to me. My wife says I'm the last person to find out anything interesting. Okay, so thanks very much. I look forward to this being supported, and then we'll go off to the other one. But a lot of this came from before my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Chair, just before you put the vote, I would like it formally recorded, if it's the will of this committee, your role in chairing this. I think you've been very fair. You really speak after others have spoken. It's been a good process, and if it's the will of the committee, I'd like to see that your chairing is recorded, and our grateful thanks.
Well, that's very kind of you, Mike. we could just make a note of it. Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I understand the intent and very much appreciate it, but also very much a team effort, I felt, as well. Okay, so look, I'll put it to the vote, and some of the councillors have indicated that they're going to register the votes against certain things. So I might just go around the room after the vote to make sure I've picked up everyone's notes around their voting. So I'll put it on voices. So all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against,
Aye.
say no. Any abstentions? Okay, okay, I'll declare it carried with notes, with the notes. So starting with you, Councillor, just if you can speak into microphone so they pick it up.
I'm opposed to A1, which is a rate increase. I also have issues with B, but I've mentioned those.
Thanks for clarifying that. Are there any others?
As I referred to before, just on the fix and finish fund, if my note could be recorded there.
Okay, that's all clear. Very good. Thank you. That concludes that item. What we'll do, I think we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll come back to item 11. Okay. So perhaps if we convene at past.